Hi there. This is just a quick note to tell you about an incredibly exciting event that's coming up this October 11th and 12th in New York City. It's an unspeakeasy retreat on steroids. It is not only co-ed, since you guys have been asking for it, it is going to be bigger than our usual retreats with more speakers and more participants. The lineup of speakers is still in the works. We're still adding more, but at the moment, it includes, are you ready? So many friends of the podcast: John McWhorter, Carol Hooven, Mike Pesca, Peter Moskos, Alana Newhouse, Andrew Hartz, Ben Appel, and Lisa Sellen Davis, just to name a few. The way it's going to work is that the speakers will do panels or be interviewed, sometimes by me, sometimes by others. And pretty quickly, those panels will open up to include the attendees, and it will turn into a larger discussion. Not just an audience Q&A, but a real conversation where you can interact with your intellectual heroes. Again, this is happening October 11th and 12th in New York City. It'll go from about 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. each day. Lunch is included. As with all Unspeakeasy retreats, it is off the record, no social media. We're going to sit down, we're going to concentrate, we're going to spend an amazing 2 days together. Spaces are limited, so go to theunspeakeasy.com/retreats to find out how to sign up. Hope to see you there.
When I was a child and I saw an opera on stage, for example, I really believed that it was real. I really believed that those were the characters, and when I saw Magic Flute for the first time and then I would rewatch it every day, I became obsessed with it, and I really believed that Papageno was going to hang himself. So I would run and hide in the cupboard, so that every time that music came in. Even now, I conducted Magic Flute last year, and even now, whenever I hear that music, without even realizing it, I shudder just inwardly, because I remember that childhood trauma.
Welcome to the Unspeakable Podcast. I'm your host, Meghan. As you might have heard me say from time to time, I am going to try to make a point to cover the arts more on this podcast, particularly music. That is why I was delighted to have the chance to interview one of the most exciting musical talents working today. Alma Deutscher is, or was, a child prodigy for whom comparisons to Mozart actually are appropriate. You hear that comparison made a lot with child prodigies, but in her case, not only did she grow up in Vienna, where Mozart spent much of his life, but by age 6, Alma had composed her first piano sonata. At 7, a short opera. At age 9, a violin concerto, and her first full-length opera at age 10. At age 12, she was the subject of a 2017 60 Minutes segment that catapulted her to fame. And in 2021, she began studying conducting with Johannes Wildner in Vienna, the legendary conductor. I am telling you all this because Alma is now 20 and has just composed her first music for ballet. It happens to be a collaboration with a former guest of this podcast, Lincoln Jones, who's the founder and director of the American Contemporary Ballet, based in Los Angeles. Lincoln was on the podcast just over 2 years ago, and we had a fantastic conversation about the logistics and politics of running a dance company and, in fact, any kind of arts organization in a complicated political landscape. More importantly, though, we just talked about dance, which Lincoln is uniquely eloquent about. For this interview, Lincoln and Alma came together to talk about their work together on the Euterpides, a ballet that tells the story of Euterpe, the ancient Greek muse of music, who, as the story goes, sends her goddess daughters to dance with a mortal that she has fallen for. This conversation is about collaboration, creativity, the tension between inspiration and craft, what it's like to have such an intense musical mind, and it's really, really interesting. We spoke just the other day on Memorial Day, and I wanted to get the episode out quickly because the ballet is premiering in LA on June 5th and will run until June 28th. I wanted to give everybody a chance to know about it. There is currently an audience support campaign that allows the public to contribute to the production and be part of it in various ways. I will link to that in the show notes, and Lincoln's going to talk about that toward the end of the conversation. Mostly, though, this is just a really special interview about the craft of music and of dance. It's the kind of thing I love bringing to you. It's not about the culture wars. It's just culture. So with that, here is Alma Deutscher with Lincoln Jones. Alma Deutscher and Lincoln Jones, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think it's worth saying that we are in 3 time zones. Alma, you are in Paris. Lincoln, you're in Los Angeles, and I'm in New York at the moment. Quite a cosmopolitan trio we are. So I'm really glad we were able to come together. We're talking about what sounds like an absolutely wonderful collaboration that will be performed soon by the American Contemporary Ballet, which is the company that you, Lincoln, are the founder and director of. Alma, you are a composer, musician. You have composed this ballet. So I want to talk about what it is like to write music for dance. I think it's something that a lot of people don't think about. But before we get to that, why don't we just start with how this collaboration came about? Lincoln, was this your idea?
Yeah, I knew of Alma and through a professor at Northwestern who was doing research into how musicians had been trained in the Baroque and classical eras. And so I learned of Alma, and then someone brought her up to me again more recently. And I thought, I haven't checked in on her for a while. And I listened to some of her music and I liked it so much. And so I wrote and asked if they would be interested.
Is that accurate, Alma?
It sounds accurate to me, yes.
Fact check me, yeah.
So you have never composed for ballet before. This is your first time. I mean, what we do know about you, and as I mentioned in the introduction, you have been composing music since you were very young. I think you did your first opera when you were 12?
Oh, before that, when I was 8, actually.
When you were 8, okay. And how old were you when you composed and had performed your very first piece of music? Was it what kind of piece was it?
Well, when I was 6, probably, is when I started composing piano sonata, and then I played it on the piano myself.
Right. Okay. So, but you had never composed for dance before. Is this something that you had wanted to do?
Well, no, this is the first time that I'm composing a ballet. I love ballet. I love dancing. I'm actually a passionate ballroom dancer myself. And I even did ballet as a child. But I've never composed a ballet before. And so I was very intrigued by the idea when Lincoln approached me. And this was really something that I thought could be very exciting for me to do.
So this production is the Euterpides, which is based on the myth of Euterpe, the Greek muse of music. I'm kind of embarrassed that I was not familiar with Euterpe. Should I be embarrassed about that?
Well, no. I mean, so Euterpe is the Greek muse of music, has been around for millennia. But the Euterpides, which means the descendants of Euterpe, is actually my invention.
Okay, good. I kind of thought that, but then I didn't want to, got to save face. Okay.
It's a great invention, I think. It's quite funny that the goddesses' names are derived from we invented that they're derived from music, and that they each have a solo dance and a variation to highlight the musical effect. I like that idea.
Okay, so where did you start with this? Like, you came up with this idea, Lincoln. How does it even start? I mean, you're a choreographer, obviously, but if you are imagining a story and you come up with this concept of Euterpe, you write it down like on a piece of paper? Is it a score? Is it like a choreography kind of document?
Well, it goes through several phases. I think the same way like developing a screenplay would, where, first, the first thing was, ballet really only admits certain subjects in terms of there's a whole range of thematic things you can do with ballet, but there's a lot of things that don't go well in ballet. For instance, in the 19th century, you had a lot of story ballets. And so you had like Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, The Nutcracker. And today, I think for audiences watching those, it's a little bit difficult because when we think we're going to see a story, we expect the plot to move. But that's not really what ballet is about. Ballet is really about dancing. And so, the great choreographer George Balanchine had this saying, which is there's no mothers-in-law in ballet. And what he meant by that is there's only so much you can convey through mime and hand gestures. And so these old ballets, although they're great, you would have sort of this plot that was conveyed by mime, and then people would dance for a while, and then the plot would move again a little bit where somebody conveyed something. But, while you can convey maybe I love you or I want to marry you, it's very difficult to convey this is my mother-in-law through hand gestures.
Wait, what does this? What does this mean? There are no mothers-in-law in ballet. Are you talking about like mothers-in-law that gesticulate a lot? What is this exactly? Okay, not Jewish mothers-in-law. Okay, sorry, I don't know where this is going.
Okay, so if you're going to have a plot in ballet, if you're going to have a story, right? They don't speak in ballet, so the range of concepts that you can translate to an audience have to all come through physical gesture, essentially. And so the way that they solved this in the era of ballets that we still know the best, the era of like Swan Lake and Sleeping Beauty, the way they solved this was that the characters would mime to each other. So they might say like, I love you, or I want to marry you by pointing at their finger. But his quip about there's no mothers-in-law in ballet is saying that there's no way to gesticulate the concept of this woman is my mother-in-law.
Okay.
So it was a very simple way of saying the plots in ballet can't be that great because you just can't make them that complex. So what Balanchine did is he started making ballet that was more like music. If you listen to the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven, we all feel that something very important, very serious, and very intense is going on, but nobody can say definitively what that thing is. And it's different from, say, the Seventh Symphony of Beethoven, which, the first movement has a much lighter feel. So it's not that these works carry any less weight, but they don't have to tell a story to carry weight. And so when you're looking for a good ballet subject, you need something that naturally fits physical movement. And so a ballet about music, a ballet in which these goddesses represent musical gestures, which are also very evocative of physical gestures, is sort of a natural fit for a ballet subject.
Okay, and so how does that translate to you, Alma, as a composer? Like, what do you, with everything that Lincoln just laid out, like, what do you do with that when you start to think about what kind of music to create?
Well, I was thinking about different effects and what musical effects I could do the most interesting things with. So I was picking which goddesses I wanted to have as the five daughters of Euterpe, and I ended up with Lyra and Numi and Hemiola and Stacte or staccato. So things that I thought I had inspiration to do interesting things musically with. I could really use their solo dance to show off musical effects and do interesting things with the music. And I think it's also nice for the audience because you can really, they see visually what's happening. But for example, Numi, who's the goddess who then also dances the pas de deux, and she is the goddess of breath. And so in her solo dance, there are quite a few fermatas, caesuras, where the music breathes, and you can really see what's happening visually on the stage and also hear it in the music. So
to give you some more background on this, Meghan, so what we started with was the idea of what makes great dance music, because this is Alma's first ballet, and it was my first chance really to create a ballet with a composer that I was going to be working this closely with in the preparation of it. I've worked with composers before, but it's really been more like, this is the idea for the ballet. This is about how long it needs to be. This is the kind of the thing. And they sort of handed me some music. But what I really wanted to do was work closely in the development of it. That's actually how the great ballet scores got made. And so Alma and I talked a bit about like what makes for great dance music. And one of the things that makes for great dance music is a lot of contrast in a short period of time. So for instance, if you think of music that's very serene and doesn't change much, like Philip Glass, sometimes has these long stretches of sort of a mood, right? That might be very good for cinema, but it doesn't make you necessarily want to get up and dance.
I guess if you're a really novice dancer, Philip Glass might be good. Or if you, maybe for yoga, if you're lying on the floor. Okay.
So you want something that makes you want to get up and move. And, if you think about even when you go out to dance on a dance floor, it's when there's a sudden change in the music that it kind of like drives an impetus to move. So the idea started with how do we get a bunch of different contrasts and different effects in music? And then so I started thinking about the different things in music that kind of are fun to dance to, like staccato, which is the separation of notes. That can drive a certain sort of physical impetus. And then, like Alma was just saying, breath, the idea of musical phrasing that sort of stretches and then moves again. Or hemiola, which means a shift in meter, where you're going from 2 to 3 or 4 to 3. And so I started thinking about this and thought, like, well, these could all be goddesses representing, if the muse of music had daughters, they would be all these different effects in music. And so it allowed us to create a ballet that was not only about music, but that sort of allows the audience to learn about music and see into the score as they're watching it, because you're not only learning the name of these things and seeing it sort of personified as this character, but you're seeing how it can be expressed in various ways in music and in dance.
So that's so interesting that each of the characters has a kind of a sort of stylistic motif.
Yes.
Do they also have melodic themes? Like, is it the sort of thing like you often see in opera, where each character is assigned a sort of like signature melody that sort of is woven throughout?
I was considering what the best way how the best way to form this was. And in the end, I decided on theme and variations. So I picked one theme, which all the goddesses danced to in the opening number. And then each solo dance was a variation on that theme with the musical effects that we were depicting on stage. And in the beginning, the variations are, of course, more similar to the theme. And then the last ones are really loosely inspired on the theme.
So it's almost the exact opposite of what you said, Meghan. Instead of choosing a different melody for each, by choosing essentially the same melody for each, you then see how each of their effects really changes it. And like Alma was saying, the first variation, which is lyra, which means arpeggio, which is when you take a chord and you break up the notes of the chord, it's very easy to see how she has altered the theme a little bit. And then as these different characters come in, they start altering it more and more. And so it sort of allows the listener to hear, okay, now I hear how this is happening. So it's another way is sort of to teach people how to hear music.
And so for the melody or theme that you ultimately chose, Alma, was it an obvious choice? Was it the first thing that came to you? Was it the only thing that came to you? Or did you have several that were swirling around and you finally said, okay, this is the one that works the best?
Well, I had one melody that I knew I definitely wanted to use for the pas de deux, because I felt it was just meant to be in a ballet, and I could imagine the dancing so really very clearly in my imagination, and I was just very inspired to use that melody. For the theme and variations, I also thought a little bit, and then I picked the theme. It was a theme that I'd already had for some time, and I had never quite known what exactly to do with it, and I just thought this would be perfect for this ballet, because it starts quite in a gentle, lilting way, and I started playing around with it, and I saw that I found lots of interesting ways to play with it, because I wanted to see what can I do with the variations on this theme. How can I develop it and start simply and then really play with the snippets of the theme, so that tease the listener but also remind them of the theme. And it was distinctive enough that I had a lot of possibilities. So I chose that theme quite quickly, actually.
And is this a full orchestra? What was the orchestration in your mind?
It's a string orchestra with piano.
Okay. Okay. And when you're composing, are you on piano? Are you on violin? Are you just sitting there writing it down in your head?
Well, I mean, lots of people think that composing really just means you need to compose with an instrument. And for me, anyway, a lot of composing goes on in my mind. And I can be sitting somewhere without any instrument and thinking about a certain transition, and I can suddenly think of a solution. So, but a lot of this ballet, I composed on the piano without writing anything down, and I would send recordings to Lincoln. And
Got it.
it was very interesting for me also working with because this is the first time for me to work with a choreographer. And it was a very interesting experience because I would send the recordings that I made on the piano to him, and he would write back, yes, here I needed more time for whoever to exit the stage, and for this transition I will need more time here, less time. And so it was a very interesting experience.
Yes, Lincoln. So as she's sending you these portions of the composition, are you actually working with the dancers, working on choreography, or are you not at that stage yet?
No, yes. So the whole process of this ballet happened quite quickly because I found I had a space in a program that I could do it. I already knew Alma and wanted to work with her. So I said, can you make a ballet of 10 minutes in this amount of time? Turns out ended up being twice as long, but I asked her if she could make it very quickly. So, the writing down of the music is what takes a long time, at least for Alma. And so she would send me these things, and then I would immediately put them into rehearsal. And then essentially I was choreographing while she was doing the orchestrations, and then we were both sort of done at the same time.
Oh, wow. Okay. And are you talking on video? Are you collaborating? Like, what's your communication?
It was mostly email.
Yeah.
I would say,
wow.
Email, and then she would send back either videos or audio recordings. For the most part, the variations, I just took as is. They were great, except that I did ask for introductions because sometimes in ballet, it's good to have an introduction because it lets the dancer know when the downbeat is coming so they can start right when they need to start. And then for the more storytelling parts, because there's the plot, if you could call it that, is that a mortal who is the representation of the composer is inspired by these goddesses. And so a mortal encounters them, or they come to him and he dances with them. And so that's where Alma was saying, I would say, like, could we have a little bit more time for this? This is what I'm planning to happen on stage. And then she would actually write to that. And it was interesting because what she came up with was not at all actually what I'd envisioned. Not that I had envisioned a specific composition, but I might have envisioned like a form or a certain pattern in the music. And what she did was far more interesting. And that was really what I was after, because I think that this kind of close collaboration is what produces the great ballets, and as opposed to just this sort of siloing that you often see today, where somebody writes some music and then they hand it to somebody and they make a ballet.
What was the collaboration like between, say, Aaron Copland and Martha Graham? I mean, I know that's a very obvious example, but, Rites of Spring, Aaron, this is somebody who's a very, prominent, known composer in his own right, famous composer and a legendary famous choreographer. Did they have a similar collaboration?
No, and it's actually a really instructive example. So I don't, not the Rite of Spring. What is the name of her ballet? This
Firebird. Oh no, that's Stravinsky. Sorry,
Stravinsky.
We're all over the place here.
But it's the one that uses the shaker drum, da da dum ba 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 bum ba ba ba. Anyway, so there's a really famous story about that because I'll need the title to remember it, but.
Appalachian Spring.
Yes. So the funny thing is Copland wrote the music, and then when people heard it, they would say, when I listen to that music, I can see the Appalachians and feel the spring. And Martha titled it, so he actually didn't have that in mind at all when he wrote the music.
Oh no, it's not Appalachian at all. It's like heartland. It's like a prairie kind of musical aesthetic.
Well, it uses sort of this American folk religious tune. But anyway, I actually don't think Appalachian Spring is a great dance. The music, I think, is quite wonderful, but the dance is actually not that good. And that's exactly the type of arrangement that happened, which is that Copland wrote it and handed it to her. But Martha Graham, I mean, by her own admission, was not really a very musical choreographer. She talked about how in watching Balanchine, it was like watching light go through a prism, just like music went into him and then he would turn it into great dance. So I don't think it's a great dance, but if you take, for instance, say Stravinsky and Balanchine in writing Agon, where they were working together every step of the way, you get this much more integrated thing. Same thing with, in the composition of Nutcracker, there's letters from Marius Petipa, the choreographer to Tchaikovsky, saying for the Sugar Plum Fairy variation, I want it sounding like a fountain with the droplets of water landing. Oh. And in other things, he would say, like, I want this meter, I want this much more music, I want, I think a minor key, and let's use an oboe instead of a flute, or these are I'm paraphrasing, but it's if you think about how a movie composer might work with the director or writer of a film, it's much more like that, where they say, like, this is really what I'm looking for. And you're getting a vision that's coming together rather than just, working. I think it's a little bit odd, the idea of this kind of separation of the two entities.
So it's a string orchestra. Have you been able to record it with the full string orchestra yet? Like, what are you doing in terms of instrumentalists?
Well, we've rehearsed it, and then Alma is going to come in, and she's going to rehearse the orchestra so that she can shape it. So they know it now, and they sort of worked out, kind of the basic things they need to work out to be in shape for when Alma shows up.
Alma, have you been able to hear this with the full orchestra yet?
I haven't. I'm so much looking forward to going in a few days next week to LA, and then I'll be working with the orchestra in the final rehearsals, and then conducting the premiere myself. And I love the direct work, the direct contact with the musicians, and really shaping it and inspiring them, bringing them on a journey, and getting the sound and the ideas that I had heard in my mind. I'm really excited.
And where are you getting this orchestra? Because Lincoln, I've seen, several of your performances, and you do have musicians on stage, but I never imagined like a full symphony orchestra on the stage. How many pieces are in this orchestra, and how did you find them and audition them and get it all set up?
Yeah, so it's 16 strings plus the piano. And one of the things about the company was that music was really, really important. Like, companies of our age and size generally don't use live music, or not very much. We only performed to live music. And from the very beginning, it was very important to me to have high quality musicians. Like, our very first performance, we had the concertmaster of the LA Phil as one of our violinists, because we were really, to me, the ballet, if the music isn't great, the ballet doesn't stand a chance. So we've, over the course of 14 seasons, we've built relationships with really good musicians around. And so we, sometimes we'll have new players, like we have a few new players in this. Most of them are returning musicians, and quite wonderful. LA has really great musicians because they're playing for the studios, quick, and yeah.
Well, I can't wait to come and hear the ballet for the first time.
Have you been in Los Angeles ever, Alma?
Oh, yes, I have. I was there last year, actually. And
she did an event with us.
I'm so curious. So as a European, does LA have a bad reputation? Because it certainly has a bad reputation among many Americans, particularly New Yorkers.
Well, I mean, the weather is amazing. And I think the last time I was there, I spent about 5 hours driving on the road because I had to go to many places. So that was a little bit tiresome. No, but I loved being there. And it's so, I mean, of course, for work. And I'm really so excited to come. And this ballet, it all happened so quickly. I mean, I was working on this ballet intensively for about a month. And then I finished it in practically a month, and it's very exciting for me too, because it's so it's not a long time ago since I was just thinking about these fragments of themes in my mind, and now suddenly I'm going to hear it with a whole orchestra.
How many dancers are in the production?
In Alma's ballet, it's just 6. There's 5 goddesses. So that's one of the things about how it started is I sent Alma a list of 14 potential Euterpides, 14 Greek goddesses of music. And I said, I want you to pick, because it sort of was creating in real life the plot of the ballet, which is that a composer is inspired by these different goddesses. So it was like, which ones of these inspire you? And so it was sort of creating a meta existence of the ballet in real life.
Okay. And what have the dancers had to say about the music? What kinds of reactions are you getting from them?
They love it. Not only is it great to be able to dance to new music, which is a rare thing, but they just find it so beautiful. And it really is. It's, it reminds me, every year the dancers dance the Nutcracker, right? And the pas de deux from the Nutcracker is this very simple melody. In fact, there's a rumor that Tchaikovsky wrote the Nutcracker melody on a bet. The bet was somebody bet him that he couldn't write a melody out of a musical scale in order. And he said, well, can it go down? And the person apparently said yes. And so it's just a rhythm of a scale, just an octave scale going down. And but it brings tears to people's eyes every time. The dancers dance this every year, almost every year of their lives, and just they're so moved by it every time. And the pas de deux in this ballet is similar. It's just like it's this melody that just gets transformed over and over, and it's just so beautiful. It just I feel like I could never, we could do it every year, and I'd never get tired of it.
I'm interested in the mechanics of this. So you haven't heard it with the full orchestra yet. So Alma, what is the process in terms of like sending the music? Do you have like a MIDI system that you use? Do you just play it on the piano and record it and send a piano track? How is Lincoln and the dancers actually hearing the music in the rehearsal phase?
The first step was to send the piano recordings. That was in the first phase of our work, to see whether the timing fit, and then Lincoln would send comments back, and then I would compose and I would change, because I wouldn't write anything down. I would just remember it, because it takes quite a lot of time to write things down, and I can just remember it and play it on the piano. And then I sent all the music as a piano recording, so that the dancers could already start dancing to it, and that gave me more time to orchestrate, because even though it was a string orchestra, I still wanted to do it as beautifully as I could and bring out details and do it with care. So I spent quite a lot of time orchestrating it, actually, but I had the time because I had sent the piano recordings. So for me, for when I write for myself, for example, I often don't write it down at all. There was a time when I composed a piano sonata in about a month and a half for a recital, and I just played it without music at all. And every time I played it, it was a little bit different. But of course, when I'm writing for orchestra, that doesn't work so well. So then orchestration really takes quite a lot of time. And that's like a skill, then it's something that you do every day, and it's nothing to do with inspiration. Although you can also be particularly inspired, but it's something that you just need a lot of discipline.
It's a craft. It's a craft, sure. Yes. So, but how do you orchestrate? Are you writing by hand? Do you use is there sort of technological assistance so you can hear the different instruments?
So I'm using Dorico, the MIDI program, because it's much quicker, much more efficient. Also for doing the parts, which
right.
So no, I generally use Dorico.
And does that mean that you can sort of play the different parts on the piano or keyboard, say, and it will automatically sort of transcribe them for the different instruments?
In theory, it does. In practice, it's a bit more complicated, because you can do that as long as the rhythm doesn't change.
Okay.
So you can't. It's not yet quite good enough for actually just playing and then it like
Right.
what you play.
I was going to say one thing that's I think worth mentioning is that how much dimension the orchestration added to because I'd been working with her piano recording for a long time, and then hearing how much more she brought out through the orchestration was really quite remarkable. It's it didn't require me to change a single step, but it came much more multidimensional. And the other thing that was really nice about this was that a lot of times, if I'm working with a Rachmaninoff score or something like that, I'll have to use a specific recording when we're rehearsing. And then unfortunately, the musicians then sort of have to bend to the interpretation of that particular recording. But with this, we were working with the composer's recording. And one of the things about Alma is like her phrasing is so, so, so beautiful, like how she plays. And so we had that right from the start. And then now she's going to conduct. And of course, it's the way that she intended. So it's a very special thing to be able to have that from the beginning and be working with the interpretation of the composer.
Yeah. Alma, I want to ask you a couple of musician questions, because obviously you are really singular talent. You're a prodigy. You're this very unique position.
Well, I'm not really a prodigy anymore. I'm
not
20.
anymore. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. It's all downhill from here.
I'm too old for that. Thank goodness.
Well, that's part of what I'm getting at, because, what I do know about you, you just have this like extraordinarily precocious talent at a very, very young age. And I can imagine that it must be so overwhelming to be a young child and just receptive to music at that level of sophistication, and having to have your brain kind of sort through it all the time, and maybe even sort of against your will in a way. I mean, I've heard you talk about how you sort of couldn't help yourself. And I'm wondering if, as you've gotten older, your relationship to music has changed or felt more manageable, if you know what I'm getting at.
I'm sure that my relationship to music has changed. Of course, when you're a child, you experience everything incredibly intensely. And I'm sure that I've become a little bit more professional, in the sense that if when I was a child and I saw an opera on stage, for example, I really believed that it was real. I really believed that those were the characters. And when I saw Magic Flute for the first time, and then I would rewatch it every day, I became obsessed with it, and I really believed that Papageno was going to hang himself. So I would run and hide in the cupboard, so that every time that music came in. Even now, I conducted Magic Flute last year, and even now, whenever I hear that music, without even realizing it, I shudder just inwardly, because I remember that childhood trauma. So I think it's amazing to experience music in such an intense way, to hear something for the first time. And I think that I've still kept that a lot, to a certain degree. And of course, now I know, because it's my world, and because I'm doing it as a professional as well, it's changed in the way I see things. And maybe I don't always just sit back and relax when I listen to music, but I'm often constantly trying to analyze in my mind what a composer is, how the composer is getting that effect, or even if I'm just trying to relax and enjoy myself. So
is that intrusive?
Well, maybe, sometimes if you just want to enjoy the music and just for the beauty of it. But on the other hand, it's important for learning, because then or being inspired by some particular harmony or chord. Sometimes it's even unconscious. I just listen to something, and then it comes out a particular chord that I liked, or that somehow it fascinated me, comes out then in a new harmonic progression or new melody or new transition.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, especially prodigies who are like just preternaturally musically attuned, will talk about how they hear a vacuum cleaner or something, for instance, like they can identify the note, like the particular pitch of the
Yes.
of the
Well,
one of a motor.
Yes.
Yes.
So
Do you have that?
perfect pitch, and I can I can
Yes.
yes.
But is that, I just wonder like what it must be to go through life like that. Like, does it feel overwhelming? Does it take a physical toll?
I mean, for me, it's totally normal. It's that's the norm. I mean, I can't imagine not being like that. And actually, it can be quite fun and quite useful because I try then to take the sounds around me and turn them into beauty for music and turn them into a piece in some way.
Mm-hmm. Lincoln, you speak very articulately about music. Are you a musician at all? Do you have any musical training?
I actually, all my siblings got piano lessons, and I was really, as a kid, I found it really difficult to concentrate, and the language of music was very tough for me, so I didn't really do it. But then when in my 20s, when I started ballet, I looked at this choreographer, George Balanchine, and he was just so far past everyone else. And one of the main reasons was because he was a musician. And so I thought I have to learn. So I started studying very intensely on my own from that moment. And I went kind of backwards because I didn't know what I was doing. First reading like heavily advanced theoretical texts and, understanding maybe one sentence every 6 paragraphs, and then coming back essentially to a solfege system by a composer called Kodai, and kind of putting myself through, what a first grader would go through, but, as an adult. And so yes, I have a very strange education, which has been based on wanting to know about music, finally understanding it. Because one of the tough things for me was I always want to know how everything works. And a lot of the way that music was attempted, they taught it to me, and this was the same thing for school, was this is what we call this. And, this is what you should do with this. And my question was always, well, why do you call it that? And why should you do that with it? And so it was really, that was a lot of it for me was, why is music structured this way? Does the scale exist as it does? And so I really had to dig in. I did the same thing with ballet and go backwards until I satisfied myself of like, okay, this is what this art form is. And so yeah, that was my musical education. And so I do play a few instruments, not at all well. And
what kind of music do you listen to just recreationally?
All kinds. I like pop music, but I also obviously listen to a lot of classical music. I have a hard time listening to classical music and not seeing choreographies, so that can be like a bit of a busman's holiday. Yeah, I really just things, if they have beautiful melodies, harmonies, exciting rhythms, that's my criteria, I think.
What about you, Alma? Is there any music that you're able to just enjoy without thinking too hard about, or is it always so intense in your mind?
No, of course there is. Of course there is. And I mean, yes, sometimes my mind is just working too hard and I'm just always trying to analyze everything that's going on. But I mean, I grew up with the Viennese music, for example, with Mozart. It was always like my mother tongue for me, really. And I feel very, very much at home with his language when for example, if I'm sight reading Mozart, then I can often turn the page and improvise slightly the texture, because I know if I don't, it's not exactly that, I know what it approximately is. And quite often, if there's a strange modulation, I sort of understand why he, for what reason he's doing detours, and how he thinks. And when I was a child, I would have loved to have had lessons with Mozart. I was, and Schubert. I also feel very close to Schubert harmonically. Feels very, very, very close to my heart.
Do you listen to any popular music?
I love popular music with good tunes. Like Lincoln said, I think it's a great criteria actually. Beautiful tunes, beautiful harmonies, and interesting rhythms. I don't listen to so much pop music really because I spend my whole life composing and listening to music. So, but I dance a lot. I do a lot of ballroom dancing. So I suppose then I listen to dance music. But if I was in the car, for example, I wouldn't necessarily turn on music because I'm always listening to music anyway. So sometimes I might just not listen to anything, or I would be thinking of something in my mind.
Yeah, no, I get that. Pop music, I sound like such an old person shaking fists at clouds, but this happens to be correct. Pop music now is just almost uniformly terrible. I mean, there's nothing musical going on in it. It's samples of other things, and
they've lost melody in a lot of pop music, which is, for me, the most important aspect of music is the melody. That's a catchy melody. That's the most important thing. So it's like
and it's written by committee. I mean, everything seems to be like a collaboration. It's sort of like a branding strategy. If you actually look at what's on the charts, it's sort of collabs between somebody from this manufactured group and another person from another manufactured group, and there's some exceptions. I mean, I think you do have some quote unquote more authentic artists, someone like Adele or something, who I'm not like particularly huge fan of, but she is a real musician who sits down and plays. But are you able to kind of poke around in contemporary sort of pop musical genres that are not necessarily on the radio? I mean, I can't imagine that you would have time, but I have sort of dug more into, I'm very into singer-songwriters, but of a particular level of sophistication. And I have found that if you kind of dig around in these sort of less known genres, you can find actually incredibly great music still being made today in the pop realm.
Well, occasionally on social media, I stumble across great melody from a pop song, and then something I like to do is either I just improvise a fantasy on it, or I used to do that a lot on social media, that I take a famous pop song, I take a melody, and then I compose I hide it in a fantasy, and then people have to guess what the melody is. That they have to hear the melody out of the.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Of the counter melody or whatever I've added over that.
It's an interesting thing what you're talking about, Megan, because it's, I think, one of the reasons that I think ballet has declined is because if you go back to the late 19th century, if you wanted to listen to music, you had to play it, and so there was much more musical literacy. And I think even in the 20th century and early pop music, people were playing music. As the tools for this have gotten more automated, it has decreased the literacy. Like I had a conversation not long ago with someone who had a friend who was a working film composer that didn't know how to read music. And that shocked me.
Oh, that's common. I mean, I don't know with composers, but it's certainly common among musicians.
And so I think that because for me, learning those tools, and like, for instance, I studied a little bit of sculpture for ballet, and learning ballet, it taught me how to see. And if I was just cutting and pasting, I think that you don't, your eye, your ear, it doesn't develop as much. And so I think that one of the problems with ballet is that you have for one, like me, a generation that grew up on pop music. I mean, my parents introduced me to classical music, so it wasn't entirely that. So they're a lot of choreographers are used to this very limited form. And they're not playing music, so they're not really aware of how the music works operationally. And through knowing that, you can sort of see in other great choreographers like Balanchine, it's like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing here. This particular harmonic progression is happening, or this particular form, and this is what he's doing with it. And you can abstract those things and then use them. But now with AI, we have a language calculator, we have a music calculator, we have all these things. The sort of repetitious commercial stuff will become very pervasive. Maybe the more original, deeper expressions will become much more valuable. I don't know, but I think that we've sort of seen this thing happen over the course of the 20th century and the early 21st, where the quality and the complexity of the popular music we listen to, even if that popular music was once opera, like people used to walk around in Italy singing the melodies of Verdi's operas, has really decreased. And I think that it's a real loss, because in a lot of ways, I think we learn to think through art and through music, and the complexity of what we're hearing. If it degrades, a lot of pop music, it's like, it's not even the complexity of like a children's book, and imagine if your entire life, all you read was children's books instead of novels.
Oh yeah, no, it's anti-complex. Like, it's not even that it's simple. It's a negative. It's a net negative. A lot of the stuff that's out there, it's contaminating our sensibilities.
And also, there's also the fact that many composers nowadays don't even have the tools, even if they wanted to. Because one goal of mine is to start a composing school at some point in my career, where I can teach the composing in the same way that I learned harmony, which is with this wonderful Italian system called patimento, where you have a bass and then you improvise the harmony over the bass and then the melody. And it starts very simple. And I started doing it when I was 5. And it becomes more and more sophisticated until at some point you're improvising fugues. And it's fun to do as a child also, because it's this, you don't have to analyze something. It's all about actually playing and doing and improvising. So it's different each time. And that just gives you the tools, the skills. Because I always say that if you have an enormous amount of talent, but you're not able to modulate properly, then you're not going to create something that's on the level of Mozart or anything like that.
What was it like for you to learn as a child? Did you have teachers who showed you how to read music?
No, I think my parents taught me how to read music. I think I could actually read music before I could read letters. But I had, for this, I had a teacher in Switzerland, actually, and we had lessons on Skype every week. And that's how I learned. I was very lucky that my parents found out about this.
Yeah, this is worth mentioning, actually, and Alma can go into it in much more detail, but because it parallels what we were just talking about. The way that Bach and Mozart and Vivaldi and these composers were trained were essentially how Alma was trained. And it was recently discovered. It was like, I don't know, Alma, you can correct me, but maybe around the early 2000s that this was sort of rediscovered. And in the process of discovering this, they learned that the university system of teaching music was actually sort of developed as an amateur way of teaching music, because the real way of learning music was much more practical. It was much more involved, like Alma said. It was playing music. And then, but they needed for the children of the nobility a way to teach them about music, as opposed to teaching them real music.
Teach them to analyze music rather than to teach them practically how to compose music. And I'm not saying that analyzing is unimportant, but it's quite different to actually being able to compose. So,
right.
So it's like figured bass, really. It's patimento is like figured bass, but without the figures. So you have more freedom in a way, but it's also, it's harder because you have to guess everything yourself. And the challenge there is constantly, well, if you're sight reading, thinking ahead, seeing which key you have to go to, preparing the harmonies. It's an amazing system, really. It's an amazing exercise. It just trains that way of thinking. And then you have that complete control over harmony.
Interesting. I mean, one thing we know about dancers is that no matter how accomplished, no matter how famous, they're still going to go to class. Is that
Exactly.
still the case,
Absolutely.
Lincoln? So I'm wondering, for a musician, especially if you're very, very accomplished at a very young age, is there still that tradition? Do you still have a teacher? Is there somebody that, are you sort of always in an educational mode to some extent?
I think you should be, because I think a problem with many people who want to be composers nowadays is that they wait until they go to university by the time they're 18. And by that time, it's actually too late. I mean, really, you can still try, but it's like learning a language. If you start learning it when you're the younger, the better.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I would love to see lots of new music coming out of the young generation, everyone composing in their own style, but everyone having the tools and having that background that they have the freedom to compose in whatever style they want to. So I hope that one day I'll be able to start this school.
Yeah, I guess one thing that happens is teachers say, well, you're not ready to compose yet. You need to master the piano first or something. Like it's considered an adult level. It's considered such an advanced level that you shouldn't rush it. But I think what you're saying
but it's
makes sense.
In the conservatories in Naples, it was all one and the same thing. It was learning the piano and learning to compose and learning to improvise. It wasn't something different. And in performances, people used to improvise. It wasn't. It's turned now a little bit into a museum, the classical music world, into this holy relic that you're not allowed to touch, which I think is a pity, because in order to keep an art form alive, you need to have new, fresh music being written that people actually want to hear.
And if you think about kids, they hear stories and they start making up stories immediately. So it's very similar, I think.
And what do we know about who's going to hear classical music and even dance, Lincoln? I mean, I was at the LA Phil recently and just had this thought, like, what is this going to be in 20 years or 50 years? Like, who's going to be coming to these kinds of events?
Well, I think one important thing maybe is that something I try to do is make the concerts more informal. So to speak to the audience and to explain to them about the music, so that it's not this atmosphere of not being allowed to clap in a certain moment, and fearing that your neighbor will look at you with a glare.
Right.
And also social media can be very helpful in reaching a wide audience. So I'm always very inspired and very moved when I see comments that are obviously by people who've never been to a classical concert, and they say how inspired they are by my music, and that they want to, because of seeing that, they're now interested in listening to other classical music. So I think that shows that it's not the case that they think classical music is boring if they actually heard it. It's also how it's also they're probably scared, many people, of going to a classical concert.
Yeah.
Because of the conventions, because they think, it's a niche.
Yeah. Well, they're scared they'll be bored, and then they are scared they will accidentally clap between movements and be made a fool of. Yes, I think that's true.
And then I probably wouldn't recommend a Bruckner symphony to someone who's never been to a classical concert. I mean, I absolutely love Bruckner, but it was also a different time. When he wrote his symphonies, it was a different level of concentration. There was no TikTok then, so people could sit still for a long time. But it's a very important goal for me to reach a wide audience and to keep classical music alive.
It's same for me, and I think that the one of the biggest things is that you have to combine sort of the craft. Like, you have to go through all of history and draw everything you can, but then combine it with a contemporary imagination. And I think that what we get today is usually one or the other. Either you get something very contemporary, which doesn't seem aware of history, or you get something that, feels like you have the weight of history in it, but it doesn't feel like today. And I think that that's a real shame when the sort of classical and contemporary worlds are so far apart.
Yeah.
I think it's in those things coming together that you get the real electricity. You get like all the wisdom and knowledge of the past coming together with something that speaks to people today. And when you have that, then the audiences just come. Like people know it viscerally. You don't have to convince them.
Yeah, well, we're going to wrap up, and I want to make sure the audience knows about these performances and how to find them. But actually, I have one last question for you, Alma. Is there any music that you cannot stand?
Well, let's think. I'm probably not a huge fan of heavy metal. And I have very sensitive ears because as a conductor, I'm constantly worried that I'm going to damage my hearing. So when I go dancing, when I dance salsa or whatever, then quite often I bring earplugs with me. But yes, probably I don't know, heavy metal and some types of pop music. But to be honest, for me, the most important thing is to have good melody and beautiful harmonies. Then I.
So I would think you would not like punk. You would not like
probably not.
It's interesting because heavy metal actually, real musical aficionados are big fans of heavy metal. I recently learned that there's like a really sort of fairly sophisticated musical tradition behind it. You wouldn't think so. I think a lot of the heavy metal that's sort of out there playing on the radio and stuff like that is less that way. But I was recently schooled. I was schooled for throwing shade on heavy metal. And,
maybe
perhaps
that would
shade
be my
belongs
next
on
big
hip-hop.
inspiration. Who knows, actually.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, this has been fascinating conversation. Thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
What do we need to know about this production? Your just anything we need to know if people want to like contribute to it, attend it, know about it.
Well, for the first time, we're actually doing something really interesting. We actually are doing a crowdfunding campaign around the production. And the idea is to sort of bring this to everyone around the world, because to be able to hear Alma's music and see a new ballet is not something that you can get everywhere. And so if you go to almasballet.com, you can actually get a film of the ballet. You can get involved in various ways that are usually reserved for people who are like high-level donors of arts organizations. So we've opened that up to the entire world. And the ballet is running from June 5th to June 29th in Los Angeles. It's going to be on a soundstage, which is actually where you film movies. And to me, this is one of the most exciting places to do ballet because you're closer to the dancers. There's no like orchestra pit or proscenium between you and the performance. So it's like almost like you're inside of it. And it's this big, beautiful space that sort of feels infinite. And it's just you and the dancers and the music.
Amazing. All right. Well, where can people go if they want to find out about it?
They can go to acbdances.com or just look up the company, American Contemporary Ballet, on Google. And it'll be happening in Los Angeles.
All right. Well, Alma and Lincoln, thank you so much for talking with me, and I can't wait to see the performance.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That was my conversation with Alma Deutscher and Lincoln Jones. Alma composed a number of acclaimed orchestral works, including a full-length opera by the age of 10. Her music has been performed at Carnegie Hall and the Vienna State Opera. She is in collaboration with Lincoln Jones of the American Ballet Theater on the production Euterpides, which is running in LA June 5th through June 28th. Lincoln, of course, is the founder, director, and principal choreographer of the American Contemporary Ballet in Los Angeles. This is the Unspeakable Podcast. You know what to do. If you're not yet a paying subscriber, you should become one. You can do that by going to theunspeakablepodcast.com or to meghandaum.substack.com. Those two things will take you to the same place. This is a great time to join because paying subscribers, paying at the annual level, will have access to my book club that's going to be running all summer. We're going to talk about my new book, The Catastrophe Hour. There are 14 essays. We are going to discuss them one by one over 14 weeks. This will be happening every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, starting June 11th. There's all kinds of information about it on the Substack. So go there and check it out. I would love to see you over there. In the meantime, I will be back very soon with another super nuanced guest. Thanks for listening. See you then.